Good evening. Welcome to the Is It Just Me podcast. I am your host, Dr. Angie Ange. This podcast will entail truthful, transparent conversation about everyday life and the lessons learned. This podcast is for everyone from teenagers to the elderly, although some topics discussed may be rated R. Every conversation is based on living life and learning life lessons. Tonight's discussion is going to be on communication. What is effective communication? What does effective communication entail? Why is it so hard for some people to communicate openly and honestly? How do you deal with people who don't know how to communicate? But before I begin, I always state this disclaimer that I am not an expert and everything that is being discussed is the independent opinion and reality of myself. Now, for the topic of communication, communication can be in many forms. It can be in language, it can be a text message, it can be in an email. But to understand what communication is, we're going to say what the Webster Dictionary of Communication is defined as. And communication is defined as, in the simplest terms, the exchange of information between individuals or a group of people. Now, that is very broad and can mean several things. However, communication does not only entail talking, but it also involves listening, active listening. Now, I know there are some people that are listening that might think they're the best communicators in the world, but are you listening to understand or are you listening to respond? They're two different things and they have two different meanings. And in order to be able to be considered an effective communicator, effective communication is simply defined as having a conversation with a person or a group of people where everyone can express themselves respectfully. And although opinions may vary, you're still able to continue the conversation and listen to what the other person has to say. Now, I know at times in the heat of the moment, it may be very difficult to communicate effectively because you have feelings involved, your emotions are running high, certain things might have been said that made you upset. So it's difficult to effectively communicate. However, effectively communicating has to deal with not only getting your point across, but also active listening to the other individual or the individual that you're having the conversation with. To be able to be considered an effective communicator, you must be open to have a dialogue and respect other person's opinions or views. When you're communicating, you're not always going to agree with the people that you're communicating with. However, you have to be respectful of their opinion and their views, and you have to listen to what they're saying, but not just listening to comprehend or to understand what's being said to you. And I know a lot of people feel like they're great communicators, but a lot of people do not listen to comprehend. They listen to respond, which is different than listening to comprehend, which means you're not an effective communicator. Now, when we talk about communication, there are different types of communication and communicators. Are you a passive communicator? Are you a passive aggressive communicator? Are you a aggressive communicator? Or are you a assertive communicator? And I know some individuals may not know what it is. So I got my little cue cards. So I'm going to tell you what the definition of a passive communicator is. These type of communicators fail to express their feelings or needs, allowing others to express themselves. So if you're a passive communicator, you're the type of individual that you won't say anything. You're just like a go with the flow type of person. Aggressive communicators speak loud in a demanding voice, dominating or controlling others by blaming, intimidating, or threatening. Now, these are the type of communicators that I really don't get along with because I don't care how loud you say something, it doesn't make you right. But these are the I'm right, you wrong type of communicators. No matter what you say, they're not listening to what you're saying. They're trying to get their point across, and it's I'm right, you're wrong. Are you a passive aggressive communicator? A passive aggressive communicator is someone who's passive on the surface and communicates with body language or may lack open communication, so they remain quiet. So these are the me and passive aggressive communicators don't get along, because these are the people who act like they agree with what you're saying, but says something different behind your back. So these are what I call the two-faced people. Like, you're all for what's being said to you, but then when you take the information back, you totally change your view on things when you're speaking to someone else. I don't get along with passive aggressive people. I don't get along with passive aggressive communicators. They're just not for me, but that's just me personally. Then we have assertive communicators. These are open communication while not being overbearing, able to express their needs, desires, and feelings. These are the we can agree to disagree people. I can say honestly that I am an assertive communicator. Now, have I been a communicator where I'm yelling and screaming? Definitely. Because it gets to a point to where it's like, you're not going to just keep yelling just to get your point across, and you're not going to keep over talking me. So now I have to yell and scream to get my point across. And it's just like, we're yelling and screaming, but I'm listening to what you're saying. You're only listening to what you want to hear because you don't want to comprehend the full conversation. People that communicate aggressively, I don't take too well to people who communicate aggressively either, because again, that yelling and screaming, it just doesn't work for me. But when you're communicating, the tone, your body language, that's also communicating. I'm not going to say it makes more sense than the words that you're saying, but sometimes your words can be saying one thing and your body language is saying something else. People that know how to communicate effectively, they read into that. And I'm big on body language and tone. And I don't know why it's so hard for people to communicate. I don't know why it's so hard for people to do a lot of things, but definitely I don't know why it's so hard for people to communicate. But I do know that some people don't know how to communicate effectively. I used to think that communication was key. I was big on communication. Let me know what's going on. If you feel like I did something wrong to you, let me know. Don't hold it in. Don't wait weeks and weeks to tell me something. Let me know. I used to be big on that type of communication. However, I'm still big on communication, but I'm big on comprehension, because I understand now that people don't comprehend on the same level all the time. I can be saying something and you could not comprehend what I'm saying. So therefore, you're not getting the message, or you're not getting what I'm trying to tell you. Communication used to be key, but no, now I'm big on comprehension is key, because a lot of people do not comprehend what you're saying. So I'm going to be saying it over and over again because you're not comprehending what I'm saying. And I think so many people are afraid to admit that they can't comprehend something. What are you afraid of? If you don't understand what I'm saying, I can break it down for you. I can give you examples. Like, I can meet you where you are so that I can get the point across so that you can understand what I'm trying to say to you. But for some reason, people still are not open communicators. I know with some people that I know, they state that they don't communicate because when they tell people things, they bring it back and throw it in their face. And I'm not even talking about communicating personal business or secrets or things like that. If me and you are friends and we're cool, I joke a lot. So if I say a joke and it offends you, you get mad, but you don't say nothing right then and there. You tell everybody else, but you don't communicate that to me. How am I going to know that I offended you if you don't never say anything? That is a part of communication. And again, I joke a lot. Like, the fuck. That's what the fuck I do. I joke. Everything is a joke to me. That's just me. However, I'm never the type to want to make a joke to hurt anybody's feelings. Like, that's not my intent. My intent is to make people laugh. Like, if you've ever hung around me, we're going to crack some jokes. We're going to laugh. We're going to have a good time. However, if you've ever been one of the individuals on the butt of a joke of mine, it wasn't intended to hurt your feelings, but I can admit I have hurt people's feelings by some of the things that I have said, but it wasn't intentional. So if you don't communicate or you don't let somebody know that something bothered you, how is that person supposed to know? And that's not a good relationship. That's not a good friendship. And you're not being a good communicator because you're not letting the other individual know what was said bothered you. It's a lot of individuals I know that do not know how to communicate. or they'll wait and they'll let everything bottle up and then they want to explode. And it's like, oh no, don't come over here exploding because I asked you what was wrong with you and you said nothing. So don't wait 2 months later to bring up something that happened from 2 months ago when I asked you what the issue was. If you can't let me know what it is, then hey, that's on you. That's a you issue, not a me issue. How do you deal with people who do not know how to communicate effectively? I don't know about anybody else, but I'm the type of person where I used to try and meet people where they were because not everyone knows how to communicate effectively. Not everyone knows how to express themselves. Not everyone knows how to state something bothers them. Like you have to pull it out of them. I used to be the person that would pull the information out of you, like, and keep asking you, well, what's wrong? Well, what's wrong? Not now. Not this Ange, not the new Ange. At the end of the day, we're all grown. And if you don't know how to express that something is wrong, I have very little patience. Very, 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 very little patience for people who don't know how to communicate. At some point, everyone is going to have to communicate with somebody about some things. I cannot deal with people that don't know how to communicate. I'm sorry. I don't know if it's because I've always been the type to say how I feel, even though sometimes me saying how I feel or saying what's on my mind may have hurt some people's feelings, but it wasn't intentional and it wasn't malicious. Just because I state something and it hurts your feelings, it doesn't mean that I'm being malicious about it, because sometimes the truth does hurt some people. Not me, but some people. And I just refuse to deal with people who do not know how to communicate, because that's one of my biggest pet peeves. If you're going to sit back and you're going to let something fester, it's like, what type of relationship do we have? If you can't let me know, and I'm not saying, oh, you got to let me know right then and there, because there's a time and there's a place for everything. And if I said something that bothered you or that offended you, and you're the type to just let it go or be passive aggressive and act like, oh no, it didn't bother me, but then you're saying that it did, that's a problem for me. Because I asked you, you said no, it wasn't an issue, but then you're telling everyone else that it was an issue. See, now you're fake as fuck to me because I asked you. But that's just me. Being able to communicate should allow people to feel comfortable with you to express how they feel about certain things that happens with you or to them. And again, I am big on communication. And as I've gotten older, I don't allow things to fester and then explode, because again, I take things from 0 to 1,000. So I'm not about to sit there and be angry, and now Satan is coming out. I'm not that person, and I'm not allowing that to happen anymore. If something bothers me or something doesn't sit right or something agitates me or something just doesn't not resonate well with me, I'm going to speak up. And I know that there are certain people who wouldn't rather have certain conversations because certain conversations are uncomfortable. I get that. I'll give you some time, but I'm going to let you know we have to have a conversation about this. Now, when I say I'm going to give you some time, I'm not giving you 3 months for us to talk about something that happened 3 months ago. I'm going to give you some time, let a day or so go by, and then we're going to have this conversation. And I'm not saying, oh, you have to have the conversation when I'm ready to have the conversation. I'm just saying we need to have the conversation while the topic is fresh, while the issues are fresh. We're not about to sit here and wait 6 months to talk about something that happened 6 months ago. Like, that's childish. We're not doing that. We're grown adults, and we're going to have this conversation about what the issue is. What's crazy is maybe about a year and a half ago, a situation transpired with some relatives of mine and a group text that we're all in. I asked the question in the group text, and when I asked the question to the individuals that I asked the question to, everyone responded. It ended up and being a back and forth with me and one person in particular. And it was like, okay, you said what you said. I said what at the end of the message, I said, you know what, we can agree to disagree and we can move on. That's the type of person that I am. I'm going to say what I have to say. You can say what you have to say. We can go back and forth from now until hell freezes over. However, once it gets to we can agree to disagree, that's letting you know, okay, you said what you said. I said what I said. That's it. We ended it. Like, okay, your feelings are your feelings, and I'm not trying to take away from your feelings, but your feelings are your feelings. My feelings are my feelings. We said what we said. Okay, we can agree to disagree and move on. However, there are some individuals, like this person in particular, who continued to still be in their feelings. So when I saw the person, I spoke and they didn't speak. Okay, guess what? You don't ever have to worry about speaking to me again. Because at what point is it that we got here? After we had the exchange and we said what we said, I specifically said we can agree to disagree. Time went on, maybe like a couple of weeks went on, and then I finally saw the individual. I spoke, the person didn't speak. So you mean to tell me you're still mad about something from 3 weeks ago when I specifically said we can agree to disagree? So then guess what? You're not the person that's for me because, like I said, I'm big on communication. We had the conversation. We said what was said. I said we can agree to disagree, but you're still mad 3 weeks later. Okay, so then you're going to be mad forever because now you can't speak to me again. And that's where I am in my life. At what point is it that adults can agree to disagree and still carry on and have their relationship and move on? Nobody is going to agree with everything that you say. Nobody is going to agree with everything that you do. However, you can't be the type of person that feels like you could say what you want to say to people, but then when someone else says something back or they respond, now all of a sudden you're mad and you don't never want to speak again. And it's like, okay, cool. Guess what? We won't speak because for one, it's dumb. For two, it's childish. For three, like, child, grow up and get over yourself because it was not that deep. I don't do individuals who don't know how to communicate. All those of you out there that do individuals that don't know how to communicate, I take my hat off to you because I do not have the patience for that. I just feel like as we move through life and as we get older and the relationships that we build with individuals should be sacred relationships, because if COVID didn't teach us anything, COVID should have taught us here today, gone today. I'm not about to spend my time or my life mad at somebody or walking around with an attitude about something that could have been addressed in that moment or could have been addressed a day later or 2 days later, especially if it's someone I consider a close friend or a close relative. I'm not going to say a close relative because relatives are exactly what they are. They're just related to me. But I'm going to say a close family member or a close friend. I'm not going to allow something to come in between us because we have difference of opinions. That's just me. I'm sure there's quite a few people out there who might agree that they're like, oh, well, she didn't agree with me, so she can't say nothing to me. And it's like, yeah, you're wrong. Sorry to tell you, but you're wrong. Everybody is not always going to agree with you. And it's okay. As long as we can sit down as two grown adults, have the conversation, and we're not always going to see eye to eye. We can agree to disagree and we can move on. That's the type of individuals I want to be surrounded by. I want to be surrounded by individuals who we can have a disagreement today and tomorrow have a conversation like that disagreement didn't happen. I don't want to be the individual that I go someplace, we're all in the same place, we there, we all chilling. The elephant is in the room. Nobody's saying nothing, but everybody know this big ass elephant is in this room. And it's like, no, that's just not the way I operate, and that's just not the way that I choose to do things. And again, this is my podcast, so these are my opinions. Does not mean that you have to agree. I just feel to be able to have healthy, effective, loving relationships, you have to learn how to communicate. And in communicating, you're not always going to agree with the people or the person that you're communicating with, and that's okay. It's not one of those situations where you have to agree with everything I say. I have to agree with everything that you say. No, that's not it. You may feel that you're right in what you're saying. I may feel like I'm right in what I'm saying, and it's okay. We can agree to disagree and we can move on. But as I've gotten older and as I continue to grow and I continue to mature to be my best person that I can be, I'm really starting to see people really do not know how to communicate. And it bothers them when you know how to communicate and when you set boundaries and you let them know what you're going to allow and what you're not going to allow and what you're going to tolerate and what you're not going to tolerate. Because people want to be those individuals that have baby doll syndrome and they want to pick you up and put them down when it's convenient for them. And I'm not that type of person. I'm not saying we have to communicate and talk all the time or we have to communicate and talk every day, because no, we do not. We're grown. Everybody has their own life. Everybody got their own shit going on, period. However, every conversation doesn't always have to be good. Sometimes we're not going to agree. But even in having a disagreement, As long as no lines were crossed, no boundaries were drawn, I didn't sleep with your man, you didn't sleep with my man, you didn't steal my money or anything like that, I feel like we can agree to disagree and move on. That's what being a grown adult is about. And that's what learning how to effectively communicate is about. It's about being able to express how you feel, your likes or dislikes respectfully, and continuing to build those loving, healthy relationships that you're building with the people that you're building them with and moving on. But some people act like they want you to be in their life and they act like they want to have these relationships with you, but then you come around and you intimidate them just being you. You don't even got to do shit. All you do is show up, be yourself, and you're intimidating to them. So some people have to find a way to get you away from everyone or to isolate you to make it seem as if though you're the problem when it's like, no, sis, no, bro, you're the problem. You don't know how to communicate, because if you're still mad about something we spoke about 3 weeks ago, I don't know what to tell you. You got some work on communicating to do on your own. Something that life lessons have taught me and growing, because I'm not going to sit here and act like I've always been the best communicator, because I have not. But and growing and looking back on the type of communicator that I never was the aggressive communicator and the I'm right, you wrong aspect, but I was the aggressive communicator and the yelling and the screaming and trying to get my point across. I was that person. However, I still was able to realize me yelling and screaming at you and you yelling and screaming at me, we're not solving anything. We're just earling a bunch of things, because your feelings get lost in translation when you're yelling and screaming, and then you don't hear what I'm trying to say. I don't hear what you're trying to say. So we didn't accomplish anything. So I've learned being aggressive communicator and yelling and screaming gets you nowhere. And I've been the person that I'm sitting there and they're yelling and screaming and I'm looking at them like they're crazy, and I'm just calm as a cucumber, because it's like, I know with me yelling, you're not going to hear what I'm saying. You're yelling. So I know even with me talking in a low tone, you're not understanding what I'm saying. So what type of communication is happening here? What is the goal? Is the goal for us to have an argument? Because if you want to argue, or we could do that. We could argue all day. And see, I'm not the type of person that's going to have an argument because I want to win the argument. If you want to argue, you're going to be pissed arguing with me, because my goal is to piss you the fuck off. My goal is not to win the argument. I don't care about winning the argument, because my feelings are my feelings and nobody can take that from me. But you want to argue, my goal is to piss you the fuck off. So yeah, I am going to piss you off in the argument. What did we achieve by having the big argument when all we were trying to do was have an effective conversation by communicating? A lot of people need to learn how to communicate. And I don't know why it's so difficult for individuals to sit down and communicate, but as grown adults, you should know how to effectively communicate. And it should not entail a bunch of yelling and screaming and insults and all of that just because you and I don't agree. You're not going to agree with people all the time. You're going to have difference in opinions most of the time. That's what makes us all different. We all have our different views. We all have our different opinions. We all have our different feelings. However, as long as we can sit here and effectively communicate, you can say how you feel, I can say how I feel, whether we come to a consensus where we see where each other's coming from or not, we can agree to disagree and move on. When you're communicating with someone and you don't agree with them and they don't agree with you, to keep going back and forth is not going to have that person agree with you. So at the end of the day, it's just best to say, you know what, we can agree to disagree and just move on. Because sometimes you're not going to sway the person to see your point of view. Just like sometimes they're not going to sway you for you to see their point of view. It happens. But in order to effectively communicate, you have to watch your tone, you have to be respectful, and you have to be mindful of the individual that you're communicating with. Thanks for listening, and I hope you join me next week. We will have an open discussion. As some of the listeners know, an open discussion is when I discuss a variety of topics and I give my opinion on each topic. Thanks for listening to the Is It Just Me podcast, and I hope you join me next week.